Hi, my name is Jama Shelton, and I use the pronouns they and them. For those of you social work research nerds out there who also happen to be grammar nerds, I can imagine what's going through your minds right now. They isn't singular. This breaks all the laws of grammar. Oh my God, everything I thought I knew about subject verb agreement can't be wrong. What's going to happen if we let this go? What next? Will the world collapse? Just breathe. I can promise you that it won't. Today, I'm going to talk to you about. Oh, wait, hang on. Kim? Somebody left their phone here. I don't know whose it is. I hope they noticed. Can you see if they're still around? I don't want them to interrupt me while I'm doing this. Just kidding. There is no phone. But see what I just did there? I use they regularly to refer to a single person, and you didn't even think twice about it, did you? Anyway, my talk today is about how moving beyond the gender binary is a social justice issue. This talk would typically be taking place at a conference. While I actually love to nerd out at professional conferences, they also cause quite a lot of anxiety for me. Then I'm typically a pretty laid-back person. Why the anxiety, you might be wondering? Well, name tags. At some conferences, they don't allow pronouns to be printed on the official name tags. I have tried all the workarounds. I have put they and them as my middle name. I have put they and them as my professional affiliation. I once received a letter explaining to me that they and them was not a part of my name and therefore would not be included on the official name tags that the conference issues. Here's what it feels like when conferences don't allow pronouns to be printed on name tags. Who you are doesn't matter to us. Your identity is too complicated for me to bother with. We don't see why this is such a big deal. There's no room for you here. You don't belong here. Actually, you're not even real. You're going to have to work extra hard to be legitimate in this space. And then when pronouns are not allowed on name tags, I am almost always misgendered. Here's what it feels like to be constantly misgendered. Who you are does not matter to me. Your identity is too complicated for me to bother with. We don't see why this is such a big deal. There is no room for you here. You don't belong here. Actually, you're not even real. And you're going to have to work twice as hard to be legitimate in this space. And if that's how I feel, as a 46-year-old doctor of social work with a solid sense of self and pretty well-developed coping mechanisms, how do you think our students feel? How do you think our clients feel? Our research partners and participants? It's not life and death for me, but it is life and death for many of the trans and non-binary young people experiencing homelessness that I work with. So I'm going to say it again. Moving beyond the gender binary is a social justice issue. And while pronouns are not the only issue, they are one example of how we cling so tightly to the gender binary and how we assume we can just know someone's gender without ever asking them. See, the problem is that as a society, we compress the multitude of human identities into arbitrary categories, many of which are constructed as binaries, which means either or. You're either this or you're that. We do it with sex and gender, female, male, woman, man, girl, boy. We do it with sexual orientation, straight, gay, heterosexual, queer. We do it with race, people of color, and white people. Each category then comes with a set of expectations. And these categorical expectations foreclose possibilities for who people are and also for who they can become. When we know that there are an infinite number of ways to be. Binary thinking not only forces the incredibly magnificent variety of human experience into overtly simplistic, arbitrary categories, binary thinking also inevitably creates a hierarchy. A hierarchy where one category is seen as better than the other. One is seen as normal and the other as abnormal, typical and atypical, conforming and non-conforming. You can change the words, but the meaning is the same. And these hierarchies are a product of binary thinking, and they contribute to the maintenance of a social order that is deeply rooted in racism, sexism, heterosexism, and cisgenderism. Not only is this social order limiting for all people, particularly though for those outside of privileged positions, it also perpetuates violence and marginalization. Binary thinking actively erases people. Rather than allowing room for the multiple ways to be, our society systematically erases people who do not fit within the binary. This is both a form of state-sanctioned violence and also perpetuates interpersonal violence. And this is especially relevant right now, given the amount of anti-trans legislative activity happening at the state level. You aren't meant to be able to read all of these, but these are all of the anti-trans bills currently making their way through state legislatures. Some specific examples are Iowa has introduced a bill that removes gender identity as a protected class under the Iowa Civil Rights Law. So policies are typically meant to protect people in as much as policies can protect people. In this case, this bill is meant to strip away protections that a group of people have. The Save Adolescents from Experimentation, or SAFE Act, which was recently passed in Arkansas, prohibits physicians from providing gender-affirming care to transgender youth. And it even applies to young people who have already begun that care. A similar bill in Oklahoma would make it a felony to prescribe puberty blockers to a trans person before they're 21. That is a good decade after they're meant to be prescribed. They're called puberty blockers, after all, so they are meant to block puberty, which happens way before the age of 21. And bills in Texas, Kansas, and New Hampshire would make supplying puberty blockers and hormones to minors a form of child abuse. These bills send a very clear message to transgender youth, and it's similar to the message that I described earlier. Who you are doesn't matter to us. Your identity is too complicated for us to bother with. We don't see why this is such a big deal. There is no room for you here. You don't belong here. Actually, you know what? You are not even real. These bills also send a very clear message to society at large about the value of trans lives. And then you know what? We see individual people carrying out the desires of those in power to literally erase people by killing them. These are the photos of trans people who were killed in 2020 in the background, and those who were killed so far in 2021 in the foreground. And these are just the people that we know of. So just take a minute. Look at their faces. These people are someone's partner, someone's sibling, someone's child, someone's friend, someone's coworker, someone's lover. They are the real human cost of discriminatory legislation and the transphobic ideologies that produces them. Binary thinking limits human potential, stifles social change, and costs actual human lives. This is why it's absolutely imperative that we move beyond binary thinking. There are over 300 million people living in the United States. There is absolutely no way that there are only two ways to be. And moving beyond binary thinking, we can create systems and institutions that better support human potential and open up possibilities for all people, and that save real lives. When I was a kid, and that's me as a kid in the cowboy hat, my grandpa used to read me this book, Lucille. It's about a horse who somehow ends up being dressed up like a lady. The book is actually full of gender roles and norms, but that's not the point. What I always loved about the book was at the end, Lucille runs through the fields, and each piece of clothing and ladylike accessory that she had on just flies off of her as she runs. Her high heels, her necklace, her hat, her bows, her dress. And I didn't have a word for it at the time, but looking back, I think it was a feeling of liberation that I assumed Lucille was feeling. And it was that feeling that I would be searching for much of my life. It is our job as social workers to work towards liberation. And moving beyond the gender binary is an absolutely necessary component of that work. Thank you.